Greetings, everyone out there. Ronnie Landis coming to you live. And so I wanted to share a bit of a transmission around something that I think is it's very personal for me and can be touchy for a lot of people. And I wasn't originally going to come on here to share this on Facebook Live, but I was doing a little introspective thinking and just realized, like, you know what, there's no better way to process this than out in the open, because it's something that everybody in one way, shape, or form or another is going through, has gone through, or is going to embark upon in their healing journey. And so I wanted to really just share my thoughts and feelings on one of the biggest epidemics really going on in civilization, going on in the human condition, which is really embracing and ultimately healing the core wounds that we all have within us. And the one that came up in particular for me was this residual wounding of unworthiness. And I had to really sit with it today. You know, I'm going into my 33rd dance around the sun tomorrow, and we just had the new moon in Taurus. I'm a Taurus/Gemini, and I just thought it was really pertinent because a lot has been amplified and magnified, where the unconscious, what has been repressed and what has been in the unconscious, is trying to rise up into the conscious and come into the light. And this, even though we know the spiritual principles and we have the conceptual understanding for how all of this works, it's quite another thing to go through the experience. And even when you've gone through many different layers and many different personal experiences in different healing modalities, there's another level and another experience waiting for you and waiting for me, waiting for all of us. And when we go through these experiences, sometimes they can blindside us. Sometimes they can take us off track. They can disrupt our plans and our flow of what we had planned to do, let's say, in a given day. And there's a lot of interesting energies pervading our cosmos right now, pervading the universe, pervading life on planet Earth, and just what it means to be human. And not just to be human in the sense of like our humanistic day-to-day, almost mundane modes of operation, but what it means to be a fully functional, integrated, aligned, and optimized human being. And so we're going through different layers of the onion of the human condition, some of us more than others. And so for me today, a lot of things came up within me, and I really pinpointed it to this wound and this residual pain that I felt around feeling unworthy. And it's almost hard for me to say that publicly in this way, because I'm still kind of on the other end of feeling that void, and feeling feeling the void of like, wow, I really don't feel motivated to do things that I set out to do today, to accomplish and get things done and to clear things off my table, and really to move forward with my goals. I'm just feeling this void. And I really realized, I've been studying the work of Dr. Gabor Mate. If you don't know who he is, you definitely should take a look at his work, especially if you're going through these layers and you've been dealing with core wounds, whether that's, rejection, unworthiness. They all really are very relative to one another, and we give them names and labels and try to define them and trace them back to prior life experiences, usually almost always traced back to our childhood in some way or another. And I've been studying his work a lot lately, just as a professional, and looking at his work, his clinical work, using psychedelics in a clinical setting, in a shamanic and ceremonial setting, but also just his clinical developmental psychology work. And it's been really, really powerful, because the insights that have come out have just really pinpointed some things for me that I had been dealing with, in certain energies that have been driving my behavior and driving almost this like manic anxiety that's come in different shapes and forms, and is kind of been on the undercurrent of a lot of my behavior. Almost getting to a place of obsessive compulsiveness around certain aspects of developing a successful business and being an entrepreneur and being a public figure and different things around that, feeling like I have to have a solid presence that's like I'm daily present on social media, and I have all these powerful insights and things to share with people, and also feeling the ebb and the flow of even wanting to be in front of a computer screen and feeling a lot of these different dissonant energies that have been competing with one another, and feeling a lot of different things, feeling that no matter how accomplished I am, no matter how many books I've written, how many lectures I've given, how many coaching clients' lives that I've positively impacted, and how much admiration and respect that I receive from other people, there's been this lingering feeling of not being enough, not enoughness, not feeling like I've done enough, not feeling like that I'm even capable of doing enough to overcome this void inside of me that's rooted in a deep pain and a deep sorrow. And ultimately what it really comes down to is my feeling of being unworthy of the respect, unworthy of the admiration, unworthy of the abundance, unworthy of the love and the joy of life, and the people that show up in my life to shower me in that love. And, a day before I go into my Jesus year, my 33rd birthday tomorrow, it's just fascinating to me how all this has really come up. And I wanted to share this with you. I wanted to share this with everyone out there in the world that would benefit from this insight, because I think we all feel this, in some way. We all go through these challenges, these internal struggles, and some of us have found tools and ways to navigate through the labyrinth of our own mind and the labyrinth of our own emotional roller coaster and the different things that are influencing that. And one of the tricky spots that we can get into is trying to conceptually understand what's going on without having a bodily process. In other words, going about it from a disembodied state where we're trying to understand it so much, but we're not embodied. We don't have a physical practice that allows us to actually feel the emotion, feel the feelings that are coming through, and be absolutely present and absolutely willing to feel the current and the emotional fluctuation in the waves that happen, simply because it's uncomfortable. It's very, very uncomfortable to go through those waves. If the mind gets too invested in the process, then we can really seriously do some psychological damage to ourselves if we don't have the tools, we don't have some kind of guidance, some kind of mentorship, some kind of insight around, or I should say some kind of context for the experience. It's really important to have almost like an archetypical mythic context for the experience, because if we just have the experience and it starts to disrupt and destabilize parts of our life, that can actually throw the psyche out of balance. And a lot of people don't recover from it. A lot of people become almost like vagabonds and aimlessly moving throughout life with no rudder, no stability, no structure, simply because the wave caught them and threw them out of balance, right? And so this has been an interesting process for me, especially over this last year. And I could recount so many different experiences, so many different examples and stories of how this process is played out in different ways. But ultimately, what it comes down to is embracing the process, embracing the totality, the fulfillment, well, it's not the right word, but the totality of the experience at hand, and not to disorientate ourselves from the experience. Because if we really do want to heal, right, and I imagine you watching this, if you can relate to what I'm sharing, there's probably a desire inside of you to truly heal these core wounds that drive the behaviors that create physical disharmony, that create psychological and emotional disconnection. One of the things that I've realized over the years, especially getting deeply connected to nature, nature being the medicine, nature being the remedy for whatever particular disharmony that I'm experiencing, ultimately that those feelings of discomfort and those wounds, if you will, are not what we think they are. You know, for example, something happened to you when you were a child, maybe you were 4 or 5, and you can't quite recollect it, you can't quite remember it, because when you were that age and you had a traumatic experience, it created a disassociation, because when you're a child and your nervous system is still developing, you're not able to process the full experience physically. You can't physically process it and move it out the way that would be the case. You know, for an animal, for example, gets chased down by a gazelle or a deer or something, gets chased down by a predator, and then they get away. If you observe them, what they do once they're safe is that they shake it off. They go through this cathartic release and they shake off their nervous system, all the stress hormones that had been produced and accumulated in the nervous system. There's about maybe a 10, 20, 30, 2-minute type of process that happens. And then they release cathartically all the stress hormones that were created. And then when you watch them, they reset and then they go back to their business. Well, us as humans, it works the same way. However, most of us did not get that kind of insight when we were young. So the stress hormones and the fear and the call it the unworthiness or the abandonment or the rejection, that actually gets imprinted into our nervous system and becomes automated. It becomes autonomic in our autonomic nervous system. It actually becomes an automated default response to particular events that mimic the traumatic experience that was never resolved. And in Dr. Gabor Mate's definition, he deals a lot with addiction. And I started really listening to his definition of addiction or addictive patterns. And it really sparked some insights around this whole phenomena of, you know, being addicted to a particular substance, being addicted to food, being addicted to drugs, recreational or pharmaceutical, being addicted to alcohol, being addicted to sex and pornography, being addicted to stress, being addicted to workaholism, whatever. You know, there's a million different things that you could link the word addiction to. And one of the distinctions he said is that a traumatic experience is not actually a trauma. It's the disconnection that a human being feels after the traumatic experience has occurred. So this is a really important thing when we go through emotional release work and we really get deep into this process, because a lot of times the mind will associate the feeling, the traumatic feeling, the repressed and unresolved trauma, and it will link it to the traumatic experience. And then we keep reliving the experience, the event that catalyzed the feeling, but we keep retracing it. And it's like we keep reliving and we keep re-experiencing something that might have happened to us 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so this keeps the repetitive cycle of trauma occurring without actually dealing with the trauma itself. And the trauma is the disconnection that we feel as a byproduct of the event. So it's actually not about the event anymore. We don't actually have to go back and do past life. I mean, not to say that you don't ever do that. I'm just saying that to get out of that repetitive hamster wheel of healing, but never really healed, of processing, but never really processed, that goes on all that. You can even see, just take a look at the energy signature in those words. I'm healing. I'm going through a healing. How many times have people said that I've been on a 10-year plus healing journey, but they've never really healed. It's very rare that I come across people that actually tell me that they healed themselves, even if they physiologically healed a cancer or obesity or a diabetic condition or an autoimmune condition. It's the rare conscious and aware individual that actually says, I've healed. And a lot of times they won't even say that, because true healing is ultimately forgetting that you were ever in pain to begin with. That's really what healing really is. If you really want to get down to it, it's actually it's completely resolving those patterns, those imprintations, to the point where you almost forget that you were ever in pain. And that's called transformation, right? It's one thing to go through transforming, but then it's another thing to have actually transformed. And that's where you become the next level of yourself. You become a new being and an embodied being, where the old self, the old identity, the old wounds and patterns and imprintations have actually released completely. Right? This is deep stuff. The way that we are, the patterning and imprintations that are patterned inside our physiology, our neurophysiology, and our emotionality and our psyche is very, very deep. So I'm trying to simplify and distill and almost demystify some of these very complicated explanations, because I have been diving deep into this for 12, 13, maybe 15 years, 10 years as a professional in the holistic healing field. And just now I'm getting new insights, new revelations around all this through my own personal experience. So, let's go back to that example of a traumatic event versus an actual trauma. If we keep thinking about the event, but we don't process the trauma, which is the emotional it's the emotional imprint that's in our nervous system, that's in our physical tissues, right? Your issues are in your tissues, right? We've probably heard that before. If we don't deal with that, and we don't have a cathartic release process that actually allows us to go all the way through and to release all the way out, and then an integration process that allows us to integrate the new patterns, the new habits, the new psychological not thought patterns, but the new psychology, the new you, essentially. If we don't have an integration and crossing the bridge type of process, then we revert back into old patterns. It's just what happens, because you can't create a void. The human system, life, the universe in of itself, as above, so below, you can't create a void, because that void will get filled up like a vacuum. It'll fill back up with the last reference point that it had. So we have to create new references, new connective tissue to connect us to that next stage of growth and evolution and transformation. Hopefully that makes sense. So I want to also bring up another distinction that Dr. Mate made, which I really resonated with. And I was like, yep, I've been looking at that for years, and that's so spot on. And it's basically his definition of addiction is something along the lines of any pattern, any habit, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter if it's coffee, it's tobacco, it's marijuana, it is recreational or street drugs, it is pornography and sex and hyper-sexualization of everything. It's whatever you want to call it. It's any pattern or behavior or substance that we use to disassociate ourselves from our pain. Think about that for a second. Think about that for a second. In your life right now, do you have an addictive pattern? Now, here's the key. It's not about the pattern. It's not about the behavior itself. It's not the coffee that's the problem. It's not the cigarettes. It's not the fast food. It's not the pornography in of itself. That's the actual problem. It's the intention and motivation that those behaviors are linked to that creates a problem, because ultimately what the addictive tendency is us reaching outside of ourselves to feel connected, right? We are feeling disconnected internally, and we're reaching outside of ourselves to get some kind of stimulation or to this feeling of connection. And ultimately, what that is an avoidance of why we feel disconnected in the first place. This is why nature is the greatest healing medicine of everything. All the greatest avatars, philosophers, physicians, and alchemists, and everyone you can think of throughout history and in the modern day talk about nature. You got to get into nature. You got to become one with nature. The 4 quadrants of transformation in my particular model that I'm developing, called the avatar embodiment process, there's 4 quadrants of transformation, which is the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, and the spiritual body. And all those bodies, those proverbial bodies that exist within us, are linked by the signature of our soul. And when we feel disconnected from that soul signature, why we are here, it's cosmic literacy. If we feel cosmically illiterate and we don't know why we're here and we can't quite access the calling of our soul, then the rest of these quadrants become disintegrated in a sense. They become disassociated, and we feel dislocated from one another. We feel that there's parts inside of us that are dislocated, and we can't quite figure out why. We can't quite put our finger on it, because we have other external behaviors we're using as a crutch to feel something. And so if we feel numb and we feel disconnected throughout our life, we have coping mechanisms and numbing strategies or stimulation strategies to help us feel something, when underneath all of that, what we should be feeling is the repressed emotions that we haven't been able to access, or we had no guidance. We didn't even know that we had trauma because it was repressed. It was in our unconscious. And so we've just been going on about life the way society has dictated. And I want to say something about this too. And this goes back to the importance of getting grounded in nature. The reason why we have an ocean of insanity within civilization is because of civilization. It's because of the city environment. It's because essentially society is insane. It actually is. It's just like it's a pool of insanity, and we try to contort and fit ourselves into the insanity, and we actually become a little insane by doing that. And the only way to get our sanity back is to get inside what's going on within us, to actually disassociate from society as it were, and how we're contorting ourselves to fit into it, and to start getting an objective, non-biased kind of perspective by stepping out of that and getting into what's going on within ourselves without substance catalysts, and things like entheogens and psychedelic mind manifesting substances with guidance, with the set and setting, with the proper guidance and facilitation are absolutely powerful. But that in of itself can become an addictive pattern, because people that haven't been able to access what's really going on within them, that is the core issue at hand, they get glimpses and they have these momentary kind of feelings of connection, and it's really powerful, but they get addicted to the peak experience, and then they associate the substance as the reason for the experience. So instead of doing the integration work and using that experience as a bridge to go into transcendental meditation, to go into internal processing and moving that energy and feeling that energy and letting it process through us and getting in our body and really doing that internal work, sometimes people will jump right into getting back to that peak experience. The same thing with coffee. Think about it. Coffee is one of the biggest drugs going, and it's not the coffee that's the problem. Again, it's not actually the coffee. Different people are functional at different levels with that particular stimulant. However, it's the motivation and the intention, and are we using that as a way to stimulate our prefrontal brain and to get work done and keep doing a job that we don't really like, but we have our coffee and it gets us through it, and to keep living an inauthentic life? Or do we recognize that that substance is keeping us from where the real work lies? It's keeping us from what's really going on under the surface that we may feel uncomfortable with, and we may be avoiding our own healing. And this is why people go through the perpetual loop of healing, 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 but never really healed, never truly healed. Are stimulants, by the way, are they bad? No. That's a whole different subject. I want to make that disclaimer, because then you have a lot of people in the health world who are like, oh, it's a stimulant, that means it's bad. That means it's bad for you. Not necessarily. It's all about the user. It's all about how somebody uses a tool and how functional they are and how clear and conscious and aware they are of why they're using a tool. If I have a hammer, I know what to do with a hammer. If I have a hammer, the whole world doesn't look like nails to me. And I'm not trying to hammer everything, right? But if I have a hammer, that's a functional tool that I can use for particular purposes. And I'm not addicted to the hammer, right? I don't try to bang everything, and that becomes my model of the world, or the thing that I'm holding on to, because it keeps me functional in my reality. I can put the hammer down whenever I want, right? It's the same kind of thing. So anyways, tracing all this back to the core wounds of unworthiness, one of the things came up for me is that I had just been with everything that I know and I'm sharing with you, and I do the work regularly. I realized that the work that I have been doing is not enough for the next level of my evolution, the next level of my conscious growth and my own personal awareness and my own ability to sit with the discomfort, because I have been using the computer, I've been using the phone, I've been using social media, I've been using a lot of different things that have positive benefit for other people. But I realized in my pursuit to help other people and to show up and share information and really be of service to other people, I was somehow masking my own internal disarray, my own internal healing that hadn't fully completed itself. And I thought that I could just help heal the world and that would take care of it. And to some level, there is truth to that. But ultimately, it's still the same conversation, right? And I'm not saying that healing happens in a day. I'm not saying that once you get this and you go through the process, that everything is cleared. It's a continual process. Healing has to be just as much about healing practices and modalities have to be just as much a part of your daily lifestyle as cleansing and detoxification in the physical body has to be part of your daily lifestyle because of the level of toxicity and pollution in our environment. Same thing with civilization. If you are in a city, you are being affected by stress. I mean, I'm in Hawaii and I'm being affected by stress all the time. So it's like you can't really escape it, but you have to be able to recognize it and embrace it and get to the reality. Stop disassociating from reality with fantasies that we create, an ideology that isn't rooted in what is the reality of my life right now? How am I avoiding reality and creating fantasies and almost like phantom-like situations that are causing me to disassociate from what's in front of me, right? What's going on in front of me? What's going on inside of me? What are the results of my life? What are the patterns? And are they leading me to where I want to go? Or are they subduing me and causing me to be in this push and pull type of relationship with life? And are they causing internal struggle, internal stress, and this feeling that I'm never really getting anywhere. No matter what I do, it's never good enough. And the moment you catch that, now you know. Now you know what the real issue is. Now you know what your behaviors are being motivated by. And that internal struggle oftentimes it comes from a noble desire to positively affect the world and to help other people. But sometimes the wound, the trauma can drive our behavior and actually create more stress and cause us to feel like the world is on our shoulders, when in fact that's an illusion. That's a concept, right? That the world is on our shoulders, and we can actually create a self-inflicted perpetual cycle based on a concept that we created. And it's part of a victim complex. Like, the victim wants to change the world because then they'll feel safe in a world that doesn't feel safe. So they have to go out and change the world, because ultimately they feel like a victim to reality, to the world. And instead of changing themselves, they have to change everybody out there in the world. And that's a noble desire on one level. And then it's also a victimization of the world as it is on another level. And you have a lot of people out there that are trying to change the world and trying to change other people, but they're not changing themselves respective to the world that has been presented to them. So when we start to do the work internally and we really deal with these core wounds, we really deal with our dissatisfaction for life, we really deal with all the internal struggle and stress that's been created in our body, and we have modalities and practices, and we devote ourselves to our meditation, to yoga, or to movement practices, to our health and our nutrition, our lifestyle and our cleansing, and we devote ourselves to healthy, harmonious, compassionate relationships. We devote ourselves to the transformation of ourselves. The world starts to reflect and change the holographic nature in reflection to who we're becoming. Now, when that happens and you start to notice it, you have an ability to make different choices. You have an ability to take advantage of different opportunities. You see what I'm saying? It's a self-reflective type of reality that we're living in. And if we're trying to change everything out there because we don't really feel safe in here, then, that's a hamster wheel leading to perpetual suffering and, never, ever feeling safe, right? So ultimately change happens from within. And it would really benefit everybody on the path of healing and growth and transformation to really take a good look at themselves and feel like, if I'm getting triggered or I'm getting reactive or I'm getting stressed, we get caught up in situations. I get caught up just like today. I got caught up in stuff, but I caught myself. I'm like, wow, you're getting really upset over little things. You're getting really upset over traffic and over just little things. But I caught myself. I was like, okay, Ronnie. Okay, back to normal, back to balance. And then I started to realize, okay, why am I getting stressed? Why am I getting so upset? The world just is what it is. So it's not because of the world or other people. It's because of something inside of me that has not been allowed to fully come out and to be recognized. And so I just started asking different questions. What is it inside of me that is in disarray, that's in disharmony, and is manifesting in anger and frustration and impatience? And so if you can start to simply just start asking yourself those kind of questions, you'll have different answers. And you'll no longer be a victim to circumstances, because it's never about the circumstances anyways. It's about what's going on within you, and how can you navigate the labyrinth of your own internality and start to move energy appropriately. How can you design and architect your lifestyle in a way that is more authentic and more based in the truth of who you are and the truth of where you're at right now, instead of putting on a happy face if you're not happy. It's great to smile, and I encourage us to smile more, but sometimes that's not where we're at, and that's okay. And if we avoid that or pretend ourselves out of it because we only want to focus on love and light, and we don't want to acknowledge that there is darkness and there's a dualistic nature to the human condition in the world at large, and we don't integrate the two polarities of existence, then that's the quickest road towards depression and sorrow and sadness and this perpetual dissatisfaction with life. If we're only focused on positive thinking, that is the quickest way towards suffering. I'm telling you, it's not the way to go. You have to have it balanced, and you have to be integrated with the darkness, with the sadness, with the sorrow, with the dissatisfaction, because that's actually more important than just looking at the light. The light is great, but the light is only as useful as its ability to illuminate the darkness and the things that we don't want to look at because they're uncomfortable. But if you look at it, it will start to reform itself and start to work for you. And you can actually see the truth of how things have manifested in your life. And then you have the choice to do something about it. Bingo. So that's where I want to leave off on this message. I appreciate all of you for tuning in, and I hope this was full of value for you on your journey right now. I'm going into my 33rd dance around the sun, and I'm going to take the time I need to really be grounded in nature, get sun, get into the water, get into the holy vibrations of what's emitting from nature. I highly encourage you, wherever you are in the world, to do the same thing. Make that a priority. It's essential for your health, not just physically, but psychologically and emotionally and spiritually. And focus on loving, harmonious relationships. Focus on what you want to create in the world, and devote yourself relentlessly, unapologetically, non-negotiably to the habits, the thought patterns, the emotional states, and the spiritual guidance that it will take to become all that you can be, and to get out of the perpetual cycle of healing and get to being healed, get out of processing to get to processed. And a lot of times that's just speaking your truth. That's just saying what you've been repressing, having a conversation with someone and actually saying what you mean and what you want to say. And as quickly as that, you can go from processing to processed, good, done, ready to move on. So with all that said, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next iteration, the next download.